works well. I've heard that acetylene works really well. If you have a gas torch, you can just blow acetylene in there and then slam the lid on it right quick. And you're forcing the air, the oxygen, out of there. When you blow into it, you're forcing carbon dioxide in. This doesn't react with carbon dioxide. It reacts with air and makes it set up, and it's just too expensive to let it go to waste. So, and then you don't want to grab this lid with vice grips. I loaned a quart of this stuff, about half full, to a guy that was finishing a guitar, and he couldn't get the lid off. So instead of using his fingers and just suffering through it, he put some vice grips or channel locks or something on there, and he wrinkled my lid, which didn't make it airtight anymore, and I lost about 20 bucks worth of this stuff. Anyway, this is what I use. 2 stalks to finish. You can see how well this piece of plastic has sealed. It's tight. There's a concave in there. And also I squeeze the can when I'm blowing air into it, and I put the lid on. I squeeze the can to make it a suction, and whenever I pull this off, you can actually see it turn loose. Pretty good system. I just use a fine artist brush. I buy these things in packs at Walmart. You get an assortment of them for $3 or $4. But they do a really good job on stalks. And you use them a while and then just throw them away. Now the first few coats, I put on with my hands or brush. And I put it on pretty thick. It doesn't matter if you put finish on the bedding. I don't, because it just adds buildup that you don't need. And that bedding is fiberglass, or not fiberglass, epoxy, and it doesn't need to be sealed. But other than that, I put it all along the inside, all around the magazine well, all around the trigger. I seal it up because I never know if somebody's going to be caught out in the rain, and so I seal it up pretty tight. This stuff is about as thin as water, which really makes it go in well and get into the pores deep down. But it also makes it very prone to run. So you got to go back, brush it out, check all your work, and it dries quickly, so it doesn't keep you tied up forever. But you do need to check for runs the first few minutes. I like to put it on pretty thick on the first coat. I like to really let it penetrate, get in as far as it can go. I'm not taking a lot of time and care with like brush marks or anything like that. I'm just getting it on there. Sometimes I stain guns. Sometimes. Probably most of the time. But on these two, there's so much figure. Stain actually hides your figure a little bit. It kind of masks over. The darker the stain, the more it hides. I really wanted this tiger stripe to show up. I seal inside. I seal everywhere. Especially I seal under the butt plate. Because if you're going to get oil or water and it's going to sit anywhere, it's going to get there. Most people store their guns in a vertical position in a gun rack or a gun safe, and all of the excess oil, people tend to spray their guns down with way too much oil sometimes, some people. Or if you get any moisture, if somebody's been hunting and they come in and they've gotten wet, they'll just prop it up in the corner until they get themselves dry and probably some food. And all that moisture runs down to the right there. And then it just stays there. And it's not good for it. That end grain really soaks up the finish. And that's good. Whatever I've got sealed, water can't get in. Or oil. Oil is worse than water. Oil will get in there and actually lift the finish off around here. If you look at some of the Remingtons that had that Mylar finish on them, oh my goodness. That stuff, it would start lifting off around here where people would spray them down with WD-40 and walk off. And man, it lifted that finish up terrible. It would just peel like a scaly fish. What do you think? Pretty piece of wood. Only God can make a piece of wood like that. We just get to play with them. I like it. All right, I put this finish on about 3 days ago. That was the first coat. I'm sanding it 320. There's no rocket science to sanding, except being thorough. You have to be thorough and not miss any places. Then you take a air compressor, you blow all that powdery dust off of there, you finish the next coat. On coats, subsequent coats where I start getting, right now I'm just trying to fill up the grain. So it doesn't matter too much if it's super slick. But when it starts mattering, I will take a tack rag and dampen it with mineral spirits, a real soft cloth like a worn out t-shirt. I'll dampen that with mineral spirits and go over this thing and actually wipe the dust off of it, and it'll capture the dust. It's kind of cool in here today. It's about 56, 58 degrees. So this stuff's going to dry a little slower, which means it has a potential to run before it gets dry. So what I do on days like this is just rotate it like a rotisserie. Very slowly for about 4 or 5 minutes maybe. And I'll just look for little places that it might have gathered in there. Places like that right there where you got that pocket for the sling mount. It'll kind of pool up in there. You got to keep those places checked out and just not let it puddle up on you. I just saw one right there. See right there beside that beside the tang, if I can get the light to reflect on it. See that bubble? I've been putting coats of finish on this thing now for several days. I'm still in the brushing on stage, but it's getting down there where the grain is pretty full. I've changed from 320 paper to 400 paper, and I've gone from a straight paper to a foam back paper. This foam back stuff is great. Festool. And it's got this little foam sponge backing on it that really bridges over things. It just does a really, really good job. It seems, and you can rinse it out with water. Once it gets loaded up, you can just use it forever. You notice I've got a towel on a towel. This other brown towel I've been using to do some waxing and some other work on, and I just didn't want to take a chance on getting wax on this stock. You get some wax, you get a little wax on there, and it's not wax on, wax off. It's wax on, and then it starts showing up everywhere in your finish, and that'll drive you absolutely crazy. About as nutty as a wood rat. Years ago, there was a body man here in town that he had about 6 bays that he did body work in. This was back in the late 60s. He caught a guy stealing from him, and he fired him. And a few weeks later, the guy came back in and was visiting with some of his buddies he used to work with. And while they weren't looking, he took a can of WD-40 and he sprayed that stuff in the air. And it landed on every car up around there that they had ready to shoot. And there's a thing called fisheye that's the manifestation of silicone. And fisheye come up on 3 or 4 cars, and once they found out who did it, I think they may have put him under a building somewhere.